Hi, everybody. Welcome back to PCS 101, and this is for our class for Monday, the 12th of January, where we are preparing for speech number 2, the informative speech. And as you know, speech number 1 was the autobiographical speech. So you should have received feedback from me at this point. And in terms of thinking about speech number 2, some of the things to consider that you would have wanted to consider with speech number 1 as well is that, first of all, you need to be visible to the audience. Obviously, we are evaluating things like body language and eye contact. And secondly, your video needs to be visible to the class and to me, because ultimately your classmates need to watch that video and submit in feedback, because part of the class is serving as audience. Now, for speech number 2, the informative speech, you have twice as long. You've got 10 minutes this time rather than 5 to teach us about something. And I talked a little bit about the informative speech last class, and you can see in the notes below as well that I've just reiterated that you can do an explanation where basically you're defining something. You can do a demonstration where you're showing something, or some sort of combination of the two. Regardless, you want to be clear, you want to be organized, you want to be logical. Limit your points because you've got only 10 minutes, and we already know that people have notoriously poor memories and they have poor listening skills as well. You want to make sure that you're using transitions to connect your points so it doesn't sound like you're just giving a list of things. Avoid jargon or specialized language that wouldn't be understood by a general audience. If possible, cluster-like ideas that'll help you in terms of delivering your speech and will certainly help us perhaps as audience. Now, all of you delivered your first speech about a topic you should know very well yourself. So obviously this is going to be a little bit more challenging because you're talking about something outside of yourself. And of course, when it comes to notes and your speaking outline, you want to make sure that you've got keywords and phrases to cue you in on the important elements, and then you fill in the rest with unscripted material. That's what the extemporaneous speech is, and basically an example of notes could be the kinds of notes that I include underneath the video. But certainly less is more in terms of your speaking outline, because the last thing you want to do is read your speech, because it'll probably be pretty obvious that you are reading your speech. Associate new ideas with old ideas. It's an old teacher technique. Use repetition because we don't have the benefit of being able to reread something. Address different kinds of learning styles. One of the reasons why I'm asking you to use an audio or a visual in this particular speech is because people absorb information in different ways. And you want to make sure those audio visuals are effective for your speech, that they aren't taking the place of your delivery of the speech, and that ultimately you're thinking about balance. So in a 10-minute speech, if you're going to be using, let's say, video clip, I wouldn't do more than, let's say, 3 minutes of a video clip, because ultimately this is about you delivering your speech. You decide to use something like PowerPoint, again, it should be a smaller screen that lists the PowerPoint information. It should be your face that's visible so we can evaluate things like eye contact and body language. And keep in mind that something like a PowerPoint, or let's say a graph or a chart, should basically reiterate important pieces of information. You don't want to give too much text because the audience should be focused on you rather than the text. And you may or may not need to motivate your audience with the information that you are discussing. Think a little bit about how a typical audience member might respond to your particular topic. And I had also given another chapter for us to talk about at the very ending of the textbook about diversifying speeches, that obviously you have to adapt to the medium and to the occasion. So obviously an online speech that is given in real time will be different than a video recorded speech, which is what we've got here, which would be different than a face-to-face speech, which is another kind of speaking activity. and thinking about the kind of speech you're delivering as an introductory speech, which is what you deliver for speech one, informative speech, which is what you are preparing for now, and persuasive speech, which is ultimately what you will be preparing for. Think about the technology, and you want to make sure that you have appropriate technology. Think about people's attention spans. Think about inclusivity. Think about accessibility, and be flexible. Just some of the suggestions. So for today, I wanted to keep it short because I'm well aware you are working on your informative speech. I have 2 sample informative speeches for you to watch by students like yourself, in no way affiliated with GCC. I did something similar with the first speech where I had you listen and watch some sample student informative speech or student autobiographical speeches, I'm sorry. And as many of you noted, it was pretty clear that the second speaker was reading his speech. Everything was delivered in a monotone, never looked at his props, never even greeted the audience, just immediately went into his particular speech. The first speech obviously would have been influenced by the environment, that speaker was speaking to a military environment, so obviously things were more formal than what you might expect in another kind of environment. Notice that the speaker wasn't using any speaking notes. Notice that the speaker wasn't standing behind a podium, and that would be very different than the third speech that I had us watch, which was actually delivered in a classroom to a live audience. So these 2 speeches that you're going to be watching, very similar in the effect, in the sense that we can't necessarily evaluate length because these speeches were not delivered for the purposes of our class, but we can evaluate other elements of these speeches. And what I'm asking you to do for today's attendance question is similar to what you did when you watched the sample autobiographical speeches. After you've watched these 2 sample informative speeches, please identify one strength and one weakness of the speeches that you've seen. And this will be our discussion forum question, which will be due by Wednesday, the 14th. And that said, you're not required to respond to your peers in the discussion forum, but you are required to read your peer responses and my responses in turn. And of course, you know that you would have submitted in similar kind of feedback for your peers for the autobiographical speech. And I'm asking for that on email rather than the discussion forum, just so that I can summarize the results and have some level of privacy associated with your responses. But that wouldn't be necessary with our sample speeches that I'm having you evaluate because we don't know these people and they're not affiliated in any way with our class or with GCC. So in terms of the informative speech, that will be due this upcoming Wednesday, the 14th, by midnight, because if you haven't already guessed, by Thursday, your assignment will be to evaluate the informative speeches that have been uploaded by your peers and send me a strength and weakness. But more on that later. What we will be doing next class is having our second quiz. And as you know, they are 20 question quizzes, mostly short answer, multiple choice, and true false about the textbook material and the material that we've covered in the videos. And certainly feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or concerns about this upcoming informative speech, which again will be on Wednesday. So I hope you're doing well. I'm doing well, and I will leave you with watching our sample informative speeches. Take care. Bye-bye.